we want to be as consistent as we can be throughout every game among our group, dealing with the same situations in the same way each week. But of course, all situations vary slightly. We accept and understand this. And this is clearly a poor tackle. And I'm pretty confident if a red card had been given by Michael Oliver on the day, it would have been a very straightforward check complete. But he doesn't. He issues a yellow card. I think there's a few differences. The player Kovacic comes into the tackle with the right leg. There's some weight on the left leg as he kind of lunges in. The right heel hits the ground, and then the contact is a little bit more to the side with a kind of like an upright foot as opposed to a side-on foot that we saw with Gusto. A few small differences, I think, that led the VAR to feel that the on-field decision here of a yellow card wasn't clearly and obviously incorrect, and therefore check completing it, feeling that if it had intervened, it would have been a re-refereeing of that decision by the referee on the field.
So what about the second one? I know we're not going to show it, but do you think he was fortunate to stay on for the second yellow card a little bit later on?
I do. I mean, obviously the VAR can't get involved. The second yellows are something that the VAR is not able to get involved in. But yeah, I think he was an extremely fortunate player to stay on the field of play. Of course, the referee, one of our best referees, one of the best referees in the world, Michael Oliver, will no doubt review that. He doesn't want to have a negative impact on the game by overreacting to something, and sometimes players will be on a yellow card and then there'll be pressure to show a second one. Pressure will come from the players on the field. But, you know, that's also true that if you underreact, you have a negative impact on the game. So I think when he reflects on it, he'll realise that the second one should have been a yellow card as well, which would have seen Kovacic sent off for 2 yellow cards, having been, you know, on the benefit of this particular decision here, which was borderline.
Whose eyes you're asking this of? I mean, the ideal scenario for Chelsea is for Man City still to be trying to win the Premier League. Guess what? They're going to be still trying to win the Premier League in the middle of an FA Cup final. So Man City might find themselves in a situation where they might be a bit distracted because they've got games to play after the FA Cup. Yeah. On paper, despite the fact they were marginally better, and this is what Mourinho was sacked for, wasn't it? This is what they wanted. They wanted an outcome on the weekend, and they got their outcome. However you think about that and whatever you think of the way it was achieved, but on paper, you can't see this Chelsea side really troubling Man City, can you? In any individual game, unless Man City's minds are distracted.
Well, no, I mean,
to go to the question, economically, it'll put them back in Europe. It'll answer questions that the owners will be able to turn around and say that we still win things, but the fans will not have it. The fans won't say it's a success unless Chelsea, you know, pick up some real achievements at the end of the season in the league. Yeah, they're still
who's in charge there, though, Simon? So if you're the owner of this football club and you're watching those players today or coming off the pitch last night, it seems like the players are in control at Chelsea, not the manager. And it's like they decided a semi-final, they've turned up and they've offered a performance.
That's what it looks like. Yeah.
Whereas the game before, I'm sorry, it was awful to watch, and they didn't apply themselves. So I assume they will turn up for the final.
Oh, they'll turn up for the final categorically, but they might be a slightly more irresistible force, but they'll meet an immovable object in Manchester City. And my point is, if they turned up against XYZ side that wasn't Manchester City, yeah, all day, perhaps Chelsea can win a FA Cup. Maybe they still can because Man City might be distracted. But the balance of probability is that Man City will not replicate their performance against Crystal Palace last year. They'll turn up in this FA Cup final, and if they're anything vaguely resembling what they've been in the last few weeks,
they're fourth on the bounce.
It'll see a Chelsea.
Yeah. To go to Europe to face Leeds. Is this a fraudulent Chelsea dressing room? They perform for McFarlane, but they didn't perform for Rosinha, it would seem. But McFarlane kind of shut that down post-match. He says you can't question the player's character. But let's question the player's character. Is it a fraudulent Chelsea dressing room or merely the modern-day one?
But he's 12 years of age and isn't going to say anything different, is he? I mean, let's be honest about it. You can question the character of the players, but what's the point of him doing that? If he opened his mouth and questioned the character of those players, first of all, he's going to be on the receiving end of the same thing that Liam Rosinha was on the receiving end, and secondly, he's going to get smacked around by every pundit saying, who the hell are you to say such things? So he can't say anything, right? We can question the character of those players because their performance, irrespective of whether they couldn't understand a word that Liam Rosinha was saying, was up for question. Because even Martin, who will defend the players, and rightly so because he was one, will sit and look at that performance against Brighton and say, it's not acceptable. Even if you don't understand what the manager's asked you to do, even if you don't like what the manager's asked you to do, you can run around and make yourself look busy and put your foot in and make it difficult for the opposition. They did none of that in the first half against Brighton. And so that is a question of their character.
Yeah, but when you look at it, so the plan, the blueprint for Chelsea, the owners want young players on extensive contracts, which puts them into the comfort zone, which then makes them like... immature at times
But it
in their
doesn't.
behaviour on
But-
the
but it
pitch.
doesn't.
I don't think they should be surprised by that. They need to buy. They need to change their recruitment policy. They need more senior players so they can actually manage it a
they've
little bit
acknowledged
better.
that, haven't they? But also, if you understand their contracts don't allow them to get into a comfort zone because their basic wage is not what you think it is. Their basic wage is miles away from being where other clubs have got people's basic wages. It's driven by incentives, by Champions League and by league positions. So they have to be successful. And by the amount of times they perform in the side and the amount of times they play. So they've really got that balance to drive the players into a situation where they can be as immature as they want. If the team doesn't succeed, they don't get paid the big fat salaries
Well,
which you allude to.
the results suggest they've not got that balance right. So whatever they're doing in terms of their remuneration for the player, it's not. I'm not seeing.
But it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? When you actually think about it, when you sit back from it and you work it out in the cold light of day, young players, young manager, how do you expect to get the mix right? You've got a young manager that doesn't really understand all the aspects of running a big football club and was going to be a work in progress. Then you've got young players that are developing that are going to be a work in progress. How can that be a completed picture?
But if you're saying, and I'm totally with you, Simon, if you're saying that, why didn't Bully and Igbali see that?
Well, my understanding, and I alluded to this the other day, and Marcy might have heard this or may not have heard this, is the reasons why Rossini was brought into the picture was because he was promised the Chelsea job whilst he was at Strasbourg, and there was an expectation it would come a bit further down the line. Maresca does his little tantrum, and they've got a situation with Rossini where they promised him the job. He's now being courted by other Premier League football clubs, potentially that want his services there and then. So Chelsea go, well, we thought he was ready. We'll take a chance on the fact he's ready, so we'll go with him being ready.
Crazy way to operate.
Well,
isn't
it would appear so.
Yeah.
It would appear so because the outcomes have defined that. And then you've got a situation where I don't think these players, my perception is that the players didn't dislike William Rossini. They didn't understand what he was saying and where he was going.
It's the same players, different managers, and we've got similar results, haven't we? In terms, I know it got worse with the next manager, but the discipline. 7 red cards has really cost them.
But that's senior players, isn't it?
Yeah.
So where are the seniority players?
Martin
who can't
Gunter
people
in
down?
FA
Where
Cup
are they?
final.
They're the ones throwing tantrums. The senior players are throwing tantrums.
This perceived improved performance, is it more damning on the players or Liam Rossini?
I think it doesn't reflect well on any of them, to be fair.
Yeah.
Do you know, because it's like they're picking and choosing when they play.
Yeah.
Look, they're good players, Jim. There's no doubt about that. They took Fernandes was suspended for a couple of matches, which did
The smaller consequences on the players. The manager's reputation will now... He has effectively, in effect, been dragged into the spotlight by Chelsea and shot in it.
Yeah.
And people will look at him going, the ownership will be constantly condemned until it does something better than it's currently doing. The people that will skate away from this will be the players. Because if they turn up in the next game, it'll all be forgotten. The legacy of these outcomes will not be forgotten on the ownership and will not be forgotten on the manager.
Yeah.
The players will get away with it.